She thought it was just a quiet evening swim, a way to wash off the day's grime and exhaustion. She had no idea she was about to walk into a conspiracy that could get her killed. The sun was bleeding out across the New Mexico sky, dragging long, skeletal shadows over the dusty road. Joy clutched her little sewing bag, the worn leather a familiar comfort against her chest. Every stone on this road knew the thin soles of her boots. Every rut seemed to have a personal grudge against her aching feet. Another long day at the dressmaker's shop, squinting at stitches until her eyes burned, her back a single knot of pain. The pay was just enough. Enough for her mother's medicine, enough for bread. That had to be enough. But some days, the weight of enough felt like it would break her. A mockingbird exploded from a bush, and she stumbled, her ankle twisting. She tried to catch herself, but a slick patch of mud where a trickle of water crossed the path had other ideas. She went down hard. The wet clay sucked at her dress, a cold, brown stain spreading up her knees. Humiliation burned hotter than the scrape on her palm. She scrambled up, trying to brush the mud away, but it only smeared, a stubborn mark of her clumsiness. With a sigh that seemed to pull the last bit of energy from her bones, she cut off the road, heading for the willows. She knew a narrow creek hid back there, its water running clean and cold from the high country snowmelt. It was her secret place. She knelt at the bank, pulled off her boots, and waded in. The cold was a shock, a jolt that cleared her head. She worked the mud from her dress, then finally peeled the heavy garment off, spreading it on a sun-warmed rock to dry. Alone, with only the creek whispering secrets to the stones, she let herself sink into the water, and then, without thinking, a tune slipped from her lips. A hymn her mother used to sing. Here, with no one to judge, no one to shush her, her voice rose, sweet and clear, winding through the twilight air. She sang as if the land itself was the only one listening. But she was wrong. Downstream, a man was checking his fish traps, his hands steady and sure in the cold current. His name was Cole, and the river was his home. Trout flickered silver in his basket, a good day's catch. His life now was simple: fish, trade, miles of quiet solitude. But it hadn't always been this way. Scars mapped his shoulders, whispering stories of raids and rifle fire, of brothers lost to a war he no longer wanted to fight. He was 27, but he carried the years like a man twice his age. He'd turned his back on the warpath, not from fear, but from a deep weariness of burying good men and the songs they carried. As he tied his pack, a sound drifted to him on the breeze. A voice. He froze. It wasn't the drunken hollering of cowhands or the chants of his own people. This was different. It was like the river itself had learned to sing. He rose, moving silently upstream, a hunter drawn by an irresistible call. The willows grew thicker, their branches weeping into the water. The voice grew stronger, so pure it seemed to still the very birds in the trees. And through a curtain of green leaves, he saw her. A young woman, bathing in the creek, her dark hair unbound, her song rising into the evening air without a hint of fear. Cole's breath hitched. This was a private moment. This was not for his eyes. He started to back away, a flush of shame on his neck. But a dry twig snapped under his boot. The song died instantly. Joy spun around, water glistening on her skin, her eyes wide with terror when she saw him. A tall Apache man, half hidden in the shadows. She gasped, sinking deeper into the water, trying to shield herself with her arms. Cole raised his hands, palms open. "I mean no harm," he said, his voice low and steady. "Stay back," she whispered, her eyes darting to the rock where she'd left her dress. He followed her gaze. The rock was bare. Then he heard it, a snicker from the trees beyond. The muffled laughter of boys. Cole's eyes narrowed. He'd seen them earlier, 3 youths from the town, their faces pinched with boredom and casual cruelty. They'd stolen her clothes, a sick joke. Cursing under his breath, he stripped the buckskin shirt from his back. Take this, he said, holding it out but not moving closer. What they've done is wrong. Joy hesitated, trapped between fear and desperation. But there was no mockery in his eyes, only a quiet anger on her behalf. Trembling, she waded forward just enough to snatch the shirt. She wrapped it tight around her, the rough buckskin a strange comfort. I didn't take them, Cole said, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't place. I only heard your song. Her cheeks burned. You heard me? He met her eyes, his gaze direct but respectful. I did, he answered. It was beautiful. For a long moment, the only sound was the creek rushing over the stones. The distant laughter of the boys had faded. No one had ever called her voice beautiful without a joke attached. No one had ever looked at her like her song was something of value. Thank you, she whispered, lowering her gaze. Cole gave a single small nod and stepped back. Keep the shirt, the night will be cold. And just like that, he was gone, melting back into the willows, leaving her alone with the borrowed warmth of his shirt and the echo of a compliment that felt more real than anything she'd heard in years. As she stood there, heart pounding, she realized something else. When he looked at the empty rock, his eyes hadn't just been angry. There was a flicker of something else, recognition. He knew who those boys were, and for some reason that felt far more dangerous than being caught alone by a stranger. The next morning, the town of Camp Verde woke to the familiar rhythm of wagon wheels and the blacksmith's hammer. Joy was hunched over her work at the dressmaker's shop, her needle a tiny silver fish darting through fabric. Mrs. Bauer, the shop owner, had eyes as sharp as that needle. You're late, she said, not bothering to look up from her ledger. I'm sorry, Joy murmured. She'd spent extra time that morning carefully washing the mud from Cole's shirt. She had to return it somehow. Mind your stitches, Mrs. Bauer sniffed. Customers don't pay for crooked lines. Joy focused on her work, the tiny humiliations a price she paid for her mother's medicine, but her mind kept drifting to the creek, to the stranger with the steady eyes who had called her song beautiful. Around noon, the clatter of a wagon outside drew her gaze to the window, and she froze. It was him. Cole. He was walking down the main street, a pack on his back and a wicker basket in his hand. Heads turned. They always did when an Apache came through town. Scorn, fear, a few looks of plain curiosity. Joy's chest felt tight, like a fist was squeezing her lungs. Before she could process it, Mrs. Bauer snapped her fingers. Joy, there's a man at the door. See what he wants, and be quick about it. Joy set down her sewing and stepped out into the blinding sun. Cole stood there, his basket filled with shimmering trout packed on damp reeds. I came to trade, he said, his voice low but clear. Fresh fish. Joy's own voice was stuck in her throat. Mrs. Bauer, she doesn't buy fish. Cole gave a single nod, completely unfazed. Then perhaps you can sell them. In the market. Keep what you need, trade the rest for flour. It hit her then. He wasn't here for Mrs. Bauer. He was here for her. He'd brought the fish to her. She stammered, glancing over her shoulder. Mrs. Bauer was watching from the doorway, arms crossed, her lips a thin, disapproving line. Go on, Cole said softly, as if he could feel her fear. It will help. The market was a chaotic swirl of dust, noise, and people. The thought of setting up a stall, of calling out to strangers, made Joy's stomach churn. But something in Cole's gaze, that same quiet confidence from the creek, steadied her. All right, she whispered. He watched from the shade of a cottonwood as she set up a small table. At first, people walked right by. Then a miner, his face still smudged with soot, bought two. Soon, others followed. In an hour, the basket was nearly empty, and the coins in her pocket felt heavier than a week's wages from Mrs. Bauer. You did well, Cole said when she returned the empty basket. It was your fish, she said, her cheeks warm. It was your voice, he answered. Even when you were quiet, they listened. A small laugh escaped her. For a moment, the heavy cloak of her shyness lifted, but the feeling didn't last. Across the street, leaning against a hitching post, were two of the young men from the creek. Their smiles were sharp and cruel. Look there, one of them drawled, loud enough for half the market to hear. Little Joy with her Apache friend? The other one jeered, Careful, he might scalp you if you don't sing sweet enough. The laughter that followed was ugly. Joy flinched as if struck. She wanted to disappear. Cole's expression went dark. He took one step forward, his shoulders squaring, and the men's laughter died in their throats. The steel in his eyes was unmistakable. One of them spat in the dust, muttered something foul, and they slouched away. Cole said nothing, but his jaw was a hard line. I'm sorry, Joy whispered. For what? For them. For how they talk. His face softened just a fraction. Their words are dust. The wind takes them. Don't let them settle in you. But as they walked away, she saw one of the boys glance back, not at her, but at Cole. And his look wasn't just mean. It was a warning. Later that day, Mrs. Bauer pulled her aside. The old woman's voice was low, laced with a strange urgency. I saw those boys, Joy. The Miller boys. Joy nodded, confused. They're trouble. It's more than trouble, Mrs. Bauer hissed, her eyes darting around the empty shop. Their father, Jedediah Miller, is the richest rancher in this territory, and he has a history with that Apache. Joy's blood went cold. What kind of history? Mrs. Bauer grabbed her arm, her fingers digging in. The kind that ends with a rope. She told me Jedediah Miller believes Cole is responsible for raids on his land from years ago. Said Cole cost him a fortune and the life of a trusted foreman. The dressmaker's words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Stay away from him, Joy. Miller is a powerful man. He doesn't forgive and he doesn't forget. You get caught in the middle of that, and your singing voice will be the last thing you have to worry about. The warning wasn't a suggestion. It was a prophecy. A dark cloud had just rolled in over Joy's small, fragile world. The kindness Cole had shown her was no longer a simple gift. It was a spark thrown into a powder keg, and she was standing right next to it. She spent the next few days in a haze of fear. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every whisper in the street felt like it was about her. She tried to heed Mrs. Bauer's warning. She tried to stay away. But then Cole would appear at the edge of town, not with fish, but just watching, as if he was waiting. One afternoon, he found her drawing water from the town well. He didn't speak, just took the heavy bucket from her and carried it. They walked in silence back toward her small house. Mrs. Bauer told me about Jedediah Miller, she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. She said he blames you for things. Cole's expression didn't change. He set the bucket down by her door. Miller blames the wind for blowing too. It doesn't make it true. But he's a powerful man, she pressed. He could hurt you. Cole looked out toward the distant mountains, a place he seemed to belong more than this dusty town. Powerful men are often the most afraid. They build fences around their land and their hearts. They fear anything they can't own. He turned his dark eyes back to her. Are you afraid of me, Joy? The question was so direct, so simple it cut through her anxiety. She thought of his kindness at the creek, the respect in his eyes, the way he stood up to the Miller boys. No, she said, and she was surprised by how true the word felt. I'm not afraid of you. I'm afraid for you. A flicker of something, maybe surprise, maybe something else, crossed his face before it was gone. Then you are already braver than most. He left her then, and she watched him walk away, his stride long and steady. Mrs. Bauer's warning screamed in her head, but her heart was whispering something else. A few days later, a poster appeared, nailed to the post outside the Mercantile. The town was holding its annual midsummer festival, and this year there was a singing contest. The prize was 2 pounds of beef and a silk kerchief. Joy's heart gave a painful thump. To sing, in front of everyone. The thought was both terrifying and intoxicating. It was a fool's dream. They would laugh her off the stage, even if they didn't, being seen, being noticed. That was the last thing she needed. Not now. But Cole's words echoed in her mind. You are already braver than most. That evening she saw him again, near the edge of town. He'd seen the poster. She knew it the moment she saw his face. You should enter, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. I can't, she said, shaking her head, the old fear closing around her throat. They'll laugh, the Miller boys, their father. Let them laugh, Cole said, his voice intense. Let them stare. Their hate is a cage, Joy. They want you to lock yourself inside it. When you sing, you prove you are free. You prove they have no power over you. He took a step closer. Their father, Miller, he doesn't just want me gone. He wants to erase me, to make it so I was never here. He does it with lies. He wants you to do it with silence. His words hit her like a physical blow. Silence. That's what they wanted. That's what Mrs. Bauer wanted. That's what a part of her, the scared part, wanted too. But another part, a part that had tasted freedom by the creek that evening, rebelled. What if they do more than laugh? She whispered. What if Miller? Cole's hand rested for a moment on the hilt of the knife at his belt. It was a fleeting, unconscious gesture, but it spoke volumes. Then let him try, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Let him see what happens when he tries to silence a song that deserves to be heard. This wasn't just about singing anymore. The contest was no longer just a stage. It was a battlefield. And Cole had just dared her to step onto it, not just for herself, but for him. The choice was hers. Disappear into the shadows, or stand in the light and sing, knowing a powerful, vengeful man would be watching from the darkness. The festival arrived like a fever, gripping the small town in a haze of heat, dust, and forced cheer. Booths selling fried pies and cheap candy lined the main street. A fiddler scraped out a tune near the saloon that sounded more like a dying cat than music. Joy felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach with every passing hour. The contest was that night. She hadn't put her name on the list. She couldn't. It was madness. And yet, she found herself humming the hymn from the creek as she worked, the notes a silent rebellion in the stuffy air of Mrs. Bauer's shop. The old woman watched her with hawk-like eyes. You're thinking about it, aren't you? She said suddenly. Joy jumped, her needle pricking her finger. Thinking about what, Mrs. Bauer? That foolish contest. Don't be an idiot, girl. You get up on that stage, and Jedediah Miller will see it as a personal insult, a slap in the face. You'll be publicly siding with the man he despises. Mrs. Bauer leaned in, her voice a low, urgent whisper. This isn't a game. Miller's foreman didn't just die all those years ago. He was found with an Apache arrow in his back. Miller is convinced Cole fired that arrow. He has the town marshal in his pocket. Do you understand what that means? It means there is no law here for that man. There is only Miller's law. The story was like a splash of ice water, an arrow, a dead foreman. This was far worse than missing cattle. This was about blood. Cole said it wasn't true, Joy whispered, her own words sounding weak and naive. Of course he did, Mrs. Bauer snapped. What else would he say? Listen to me, Joy. You have a chance to live a quiet life here. Don't throw it away for him. But that evening, as the sun began to set, casting long, dramatic shadows, Joy found herself drawn to the makeshift stage. Lanterns were being strung up, casting a warm, inviting glow. The whole town was gathering. And on the edge of the crowd, watching, was Cole. He didn't approach her. He didn't have to. His presence was a question she couldn't ignore. She saw the Miller boys swaggering through the crowd, their laughter loud and obnoxious. She saw their father, Jedediah Miller, a big man with a hard face and cold, calculating eyes, speaking with Marshall Conroy. Mrs. Bauer was right. The power in this town was all gathered in one place, a tight fist ready to crush anything it didn't like. Her fear was a physical thing, a cold hand gripping her heart. She should turn and run, go home, lock her door, and forget any of this ever happened. But then she remembered Cole's words. Their hate is a cage. They want you to lock yourself inside it. She saw him then, standing alone, watching the proceedings with an unreadable expression. He looked like an island in a sea of hostility. And she realized he had been living in that cage his entire life. They had built it around him with their fear and their lies. If she walked away now, she wasn't just locking herself in, she was helping them lock the door on him. Her hand trembled as she walked toward the man taking names for the contest. Her voice was barely audible when she said, "Joy Harper." The man squinted at her, then shrugged and wrote it down. It was done. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She felt dizzy, sick. What had she done? As if sensing her turmoil, Cole materialized at her side. He didn't say, "I told you so," or "I knew you could do it." He just stood with her, a silent, solid presence in the growing chaos. "When you sing," he said, his voice low, for her ears only, "don't sing for them. Sing for the river. Sing for the mountains. They know the truth." One by one, contestants got up and sang, rough cowboy ballads, off-key church hymns. The crowd clapped politely, their attention wandering. Then the announcer called her name. "Miss Joy Harper." A ripple of surprise went through the crowd. A few titters of laughter, sharp and mean. She could feel Jedediah Miller's eyes on her like a physical weight. Her knees shook as she climbed the 3 short steps onto the stage. The lantern light was blinding. The faces in the crowd were a blur. Her throat was completely dry. She couldn't make a sound. She was going to fail, humiliate herself. And for what? She risked a glance toward the edge of the crowd, searching for Cole. He was there, just where she'd left him. He gave her a single, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't encouragement. It was an acknowledgement, a shared understanding. Sing for the river. She closed her eyes. She pictured the creek, the cool water, the whispering willows. She took a breath, deep and slow, and she sang. The first note was thin, fragile, but it was there. She held on to it, and the next one came, stronger. It was the hymn from the creek, the one her mother had taught her. The notes flowed out of her, pure and clear, rising above the dusty street, silencing the whispers, cutting through the smoky air. The crowd went still. The fidgeting stopped. The saloon doors fell quiet. For the space of one song, the town of Camp Verde held its breath. She poured all of it in, her fear, her loneliness, her anger at the injustice, her strange and terrifying hope. When the last note faded, a profound silence hung in the air. It was a silence more powerful than any applause. Then the dam broke. The crowd erupted. It wasn't just polite clapping, it was a roar. Whistles, cheers, stomping feet. Joy stood trembling, tears streaming down her face, the sound washing over her. She had done it. She had stood in the light and sung her truth. But as she looked out over the cheering faces, she saw Jedediah Miller. He wasn't clapping. He was staring at her, his face a mask of cold fury. And standing beside him, Marshall Conroy had his hand resting on the butt of his pistol. The message was clear. She hadn't just won a contest. She had declared war. The prize felt heavy in her hands, a wrapped parcel of beef and a beautiful silk kerchief from St. Louis. The contest judge, a portly rancher, was beaming. "Well earned, miss! Never heard anything like it!" But as she stepped down from the stage, The whispers started again, this time with a sharp, dangerous edge. Did you see Miller's face? She's made a powerful enemy tonight. That Apache has brought nothing but trouble. The joy of her victory was already curdling into fear. Cole met her at the edge of the crowd. He didn't smile, but his eyes held a warmth that felt like a shield. You were the fire, he murmured, and they were the shadows. The next morning, the consequences arrived. When Joy got to the shop, Mrs. Bauer was waiting, her face pale and grim. You have to go, she said without preamble. He came to see me this morning. Miller. Joy's heart sank. He threatened you. He didn't have to, Mrs. Bauer said, avoiding her eyes. He just reminded me that my lease is up for renewal next month, and that he owns this building. He owns half the buildings on this street. She finally looked at Joy, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and fear. He said having you work here was an endorsement. I'm sorry, Joy, truly, but I have my own life to protect. Fired, cast out, for singing a song. The world felt unstable, the ground shifting beneath her feet. She packed her small bag of sewing supplies in a daze. As she was leaving, Mrs. Bauer grabbed her arm. This isn't just about losing a job, the older woman whispered, her voice trembling. They're planning something. Miller and the marshal, they were talking about stolen cattle, a pretext, a reason to form a posse. She looked Joy dead in the eye. They're going to kill him, Joy, and they're going to make it look like justice. The words struck Joy with the force of a physical blow, a posse, a rope. It was happening, exactly as Mrs. Bauer had warned. She stumbled out of the shop and into the harsh sunlight, her mind reeling. She had to warn him. She ran, not caring who saw, not caring about the whispers that followed her. She ran toward the river, her lungs burning, the silk kerchief clutched in her hand like a talisman. She found him by the water, mending a fishing net. He looked up as she approached, his expression calm, but his eyes were watchful. He already knew. They're coming for you, she gasped, the words tumbling out. Miller, the marshal, they're going to use stolen cattle as an excuse. Mrs. Bauer told me. They're going to kill you. Cole finished tying a knot, his movements deliberate, unhurried. I know. You know? Then why are you still here? You have to run. Go north, to the mountains, anywhere. He stood up, towering over her. And where would you have me run, Joy? To the next town where there is another Miller? To the next valley where there is another marshal? There is nowhere to run where my skin is not the color that it is. His voice was quiet, but it resonated with a deep, unshakable truth that silenced her protests. But they will kill you, she cried, frustration and fear making her voice sharp. If I run, they say I am a guilty coward, he said, his gaze fixed on the town in the distance. If I stay, they say I am a defiant savage. My life is not the story they will tell. They wrote that story long before I was born. But my death will be my own. He turned to face her, and for the first time, she saw the full weight of the warrior he had been. The scars on his shoulders seemed to stand out, stark and white against his skin. They want to fight, he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. They will have one, but not here, not by this river. We will make our stand in their town, in their light, where everyone can see the truth of what they are. Joy stared at him aghast. Go into town? That's suicide. They'll tear you apart before you can say a word. They will not be expecting it, Cole said, and I will not be alone. He looked at her, and his meaning was clear. He wanted her to stand with him, in the middle of the street, in front of everyone. What can I do? She whispered. My words mean nothing to them. Your words are not what I need, he said. He reached into a leather pouch at his belt and pulled out an object wrapped in old, worn cloth. He carefully unwrapped it. It was an arrowhead. Old, crudely made, and stained dark with what could only be old blood. This, he said, holding it out on his palm, is the arrow they say killed Miller's foreman, the one Miller keeps in a glass box in his study, the one he shows to everyone to prove my guilt. Joy frowned, confused. But how do you have it? A grim smile touched Cole's lips. Because this is not the arrow that killed his foreman. This is the arrow that Foreman tried to kill me with years ago, on Miller's orders. He missed. I did not. The world tilted on its axis. You killed him? I defended myself, Cole corrected her, his voice hard as stone. Miller sent him to clear his land of my people. The foreman was a hired killer. Miller covered it up, claimed it was a raid, and used his man's death to turn the whole territory against my tribe. He built his fortune on that lie. He looked down at the arrowhead. And this is the proof. The foreman made his own arrows. They are unique, ugly, unbalanced. No Apache would make an arrow this poorly. The one in Miller's box is a perfect Apache hunting arrow, one he put in the foreman's body himself after the fact. It was a staggering revelation, a conspiracy that ran to the very heart of the town's founding. Miller wasn't a victim. He was a murderer. And Cole wasn't a fugitive. He was the only witness. Now do you see? Cole asked softly. This is not about stolen cattle. It is about silencing the past. And the only way to fight a lie that big is with a truth that is bigger. He held her gaze, his eyes burning with an intensity that left her breathless. They are coming with a rope, he said. We will meet them with the truth. The question is, will you stand with me, Joy? Will you be my voice when they try to silence me forever? The sun was high and hot, baking the dust of the main street into a hard, cracked pan. The whole town seemed to be holding its breath. News had spread like a brush fire. The Apache was walking into town, not sneaking in, not hiding, walking, right down the middle of the street, as bold as you please, and the seamstress, the quiet girl with the angel's voice, was walking beside him. They stopped in the very center of the square, directly in front of the marshal's office. People came out of their shops, their homes, their faces a mixture of fear, curiosity, and bloodlust. This was it, the confrontation everyone had been whispering about, the one they'd been waiting for. Marshal Conroy stepped out onto the boardwalk, his hand already on his gun. Jedediah Miller was right behind him, his face a thundercloud of rage. The Miller boys and a handful of other ranchers fanned out, forming a loose, menacing circle. They had rifles. Cole and Joy had nothing. This is as far as you go, Cole, the marshal snarled. You're under arrest for the theft of Jedediah Miller's cattle. I have stolen no cattle, Cole said, his voice calm and clear, carrying across the silent square. And you know it. I know you're a thief and a murderer, Miller spat, taking a step forward. You killed my foreman! Your foreman tried to murder me on your orders, Cole interrupted, his voice ringing with authority. The crowd murmured, a ripple of shock passing through them. That's a lie, Miller roared. You have no proof. Don't I? Cole said. He turned to Joy. Tell them, he said softly. All eyes swung to her. Her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. Her throat was tight with terror. She saw the hate in Miller's eyes, the cold indifference in the marshal's. This was her moment. The cage door was wide open. Marshal Conroy, she began, her voice trembling but gaining strength with every word. You and Mr. Miller and everyone in this town has seen the arrowhead Mr. Miller keeps as proof of Cole's guilt, the arrow that he says killed his foreman. That's right, the marshal said, his eyes narrowing. Apache made, a perfect match to the ones his tribe used. But what if it wasn't the arrow that killed him? Joy asked, her voice rising. What if the real arrow looked like this? Cole opened his hand. On his palm lay the ugly, unbalanced arrowhead. The crowd craned their necks to see. A weapons maker at the edge of the crowd, a man who knew his craft, squinted. "That ain't no Apache arrow," he said loudly. "Too crude. The fletching's all wrong." Miller's face went white. "It's a trick, a plant." "The only plant," Joy said, her voice now ringing with a conviction she didn't know she possessed, "was the perfect Apache arrow you put in your foreman's back after he failed to murder an innocent man." A collective gasp went through the crowd. The accusation was monstrous, unthinkable. Miller was the town's foundation, its patriarch. "She's hysterical!" Miller shouted, his voice cracking. "The savage has bewitched her! Seize him!" The armed men hesitated, their eyes darting from the strange arrowhead in Cole's hand to the panicked look on Miller's face. For the first time, doubt had entered the equation. "It's true," a voice choked out. Everyone turned. It was the younger Miller boy, his face ashen, tears streaming down his cheeks. "It's true," he sobbed. "I heard them, my father and the marshal. They were planning it for weeks. The cattle, we just moved them to the south pasture last night on the marshal's orders. They were never stolen. It was all a lie to get a rope around his neck." The confession shattered the tense silence. It was one thing for the strange woman and the Apache to make wild accusations. It was another for the man's own son to confirm it. Jedediah Miller looked at his son with pure, murderous rage. "You stupid, sniveling little—" He lunged, not at Cole, but at his own child. Cole moved like a phantom. He stepped between them, his arm shooting out to block Miller's path. He didn't strike him. He just stopped him. The powerful rancher, the ruler of this town, was stopped dead by the silent, unmovable presence of the man he had tried to destroy. The tide had turned. The crowd wasn't a mob anymore. They were witnesses. They saw Miller's guilt plain on his face. They saw the marshal's complicity in his panicked silence. "Arrest them!" someone shouted from the back. "Arrest them both!" Marshal Conroy, seeing the game was up, made a fatal mistake. He drew his pistol, not on Cole. He aimed it at Joy. Before he could fire, a shot rang out, but it wasn't from his gun. Mrs. Bauer stood on the boardwalk in front of her shop, an old, long-barreled pistol smoking in her hand. Conroy crumpled to the ground, clutching a bleeding shoulder, his gun clattering on the dirt. "He was my brother," Mrs. Bauer said, her voice shaking but firm, speaking to the stunned crowd. "And I let him and Miller bully me for years. No more. The lies stop today." The fight was over. Justice, swift and undeniable, had come to Camp Verde, not with a rope, but with the truth. Jedediah Miller and the wounded Marshal Conroy were locked in the town's own jail, their power broken, their lies exposed. The younger Miller boy, though shamed, was seen not as a traitor, but as the one who had finally spoken the truth. The town, shaken to its core, began to look at itself, and at the two people standing in the middle of the street, with new eyes. Joy and Cole stood in the aftermath, the silence around them now one of awe, not hate. He looked at her, and the smallest of smiles touched his lips. "You found your voice, Joy Harper." "No," she said, her own smile finally breaking through the tears and terror. "You didn't give me a mirror. You were the song all along. I just finally learned to sing it with you." As the sun began to set, casting a soft, forgiving light on the humbled town, they knew they could not stay. Their victory was in the truth, not in acceptance. Their path lay elsewhere. The next morning they prepared to leave. Joy packed a small bundle, her needle and thread, the silk kerchief, and the small cedar carving of a river stone Cole had given her. The townspeople watched as Cole brought his mare around. No one whispered. Some nodded in respect. A few even offered supplies for their journey, small tokens of apology. Joy mounted behind him, her arms circling his waist. She looked back one last time at the town that had been her prison and, in a strange way, her liberation. Then she faced forward, resting her cheek against Cole's strong back. The trail led north, toward the high country, toward cool air and clear streams, toward a life where they would not be judged by the stories others told, but by the truth they carried in their own hearts. They rode into the wild, where the river led and prejudice could not follow. Their voices, one of song, one of quiet strength, would weave a new story together, a harmony the desert wind could not scatter. If you were moved by Joy and Cole's journey to find justice, please show your support by hitting that like button. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. Thanks for being here with me today.